fact that there are limits to how much we can control the future.
Remember that your life could end tomorrow, and how would you live now?
Yeah, you probably do die earlier.
And that's, I think, the biggest unknown is that we never know when we're going to die.
How fear operates in subtle relational ways between people. I had found a deep sense of individuality. Tears the lost deserves are endless.
Welcome to the Willpower Podcast. Graham, let's start talking with the unknown, because that's kind of the context with which we met. So first, I would love to just have you tell the listeners about this gathering and the type of gathering and why you host these kinds of things, and then a little bit about what the unknown means to you.
Yeah. So the gathering that I hosted a few weeks ago when I met you was called At Home in the Unknown. It's with my partner, Carolyn. And the intention behind that gathering was all about basically examining and finding deeper peace with the aspects of life that we don't know, that all of the ways that, I think there's a human tendency, especially in a world filled with lots of noise, to try and get control over the future and to minimize the unexpected and really to ignore the fact that the unexpected is inevitable in many ways, no matter how much we try to control it. And so our inquiry in going into that night was all around how do we find peace with that? How do we find peace with the fact that there are limits to how much we can control the future, limits to how much we can control the people that we love and care about, and the fulfillment of our wishes, limits to how much we can avoid the things that we fear.
Yeah, it is so interesting how it's, like you said, it's inevitable. And it's not even just that we try to minimize it, but also what you said is that we ignore it. We try to pretend it doesn't exist, or we don't look at it. But there is that truth. And yeah, it brings up something I read last week. It was like a Marcus Aurelius quote where he said something along the lines of, you could die tomorrow and live, or it's like, remember that your life could end tomorrow, and how would you live now? And that's, I think, the biggest unknown is that we never know when we're going to die. Like, our life could end at any point. And it's like, how do you live with that fact? How do you accept it and not pretend that it's not true? Because that is true. It is true that you don't know.
Yeah. Well, I really feel like the invitation of Aurelius and of the Stoic philosophers into the meditations or contemplations on death is one that invites people into the present moment, here and now. It says, okay, like, if I don't know what's next, if I don't know when it will end, then it infuses the present moment with a richness of possibility. And like, I often, when I'm hosting or when I'm working with people one-on-one or couples, I like tune them into the opportunity that exists here and now. It's like, what are the limits and the possibilities of expressing oneself and the power that is actually here. We have little to no idea of what is going to unfold and of what the seeds that we plant in each moment could blossom into. And that's something there's some deep wisdom that am in an ongoing cultivation of around that. Is like, what am I planting in every moment? What am I watering and nourishing in myself and other people? And the more that I come into a sense of faith about like trusting that if I water the seeds of peace and beauty and love that are available here and now, that they blossom into these like gardens, forests, much more stunning and unfathomable than I ever anticipated. And it takes time. Like there's some humility and patience that it requires to grow something beautiful like that.
And so how do you balance that? Like the desire for something greater in the future while also remaining in the present?
Yeah. Well, immediately what comes to me is that the way it appears to me, anyways, and what seems to be true with most people, is that there's an intuitive moment-to-moment sense of whether or not I'm serving life, serving the cultivation, the blossoming of life. And, I feel it in my body. I don't, I can try and put words to it, but at its core, there's a moment-to-moment, like I'm getting signals from my body, from the world around me, that are indicating whether or not I'm serving the organic processes that blossom and grow and flow, or if I'm somehow resisting them and pushing against them, or even being destructive.
Yeah, can you talk more about the signals? Like how, I guess, have you always felt that, or have you always been in tune with them, and what exactly do those look like or feel like?
It's a great question. My sense of it is that they're always there, and that they're always there in everybody, actually, and that people get disconnected from them for a variety of reasons, typically fear, often experiences, there's a whole, the whole realm of trauma work tends to point towards and rest upon the ways that fear has interfered with the operation and connection to truth, authenticity, self-expression, moment to moment. And the possibility of restoring access that was once lost due to overwhelm and shutdown and protection. And so to me, one way that I talk about it is that there's an omnipresent sense of there's a spectrum of discomfort to peace that I just feel in my body. And it might, there might be specific parts of my body where it concentrates. I think that typically the abdomen, the heart, the throat, these are like probably the three central points that people get these signals from, though they can come from anywhere inside or even outside of the body, in my opinion. And like we can do a little experiment like here in this moment, and just like both of us like check, like, is there ease or is there a tingling, something, some potential energy, potential power yet to be realized that's in each of them. And I am always encouraging, it's not something to judge if there is, it's just messages being delivered.
Yeah, getting in tune with that stuff is, like you said, it's challenging if you haven't been in tune, and if you have those fear circuits, because that's going to take priority. And so what's the process of digging through those and getting back into the body?
Yeah. There's a few different pieces to it, that, insofar as I see it. One piece revolves around like examining the origins of the fears. That's sort of like a lot of trauma work clusters around that. It's sort of this past-oriented perspective that when we gain insight into the origins and we bring compassion to the moments of overwhelm that maybe calcified fear in us, that it frees up energy and frees up the ability to act no longer in response to the past, but now in response to the present moment. There's this like unhooking the impact of the past is one thread of it. The other, which goes together with that, is like this, the present moment acts of courage that contradict the image of self that is based on fear. And so when people tune into themselves and they notice where they have, how fears limit who and what they're willing to speak to or act around, or like where they notice avoidance or any kind of fight-flight response, subtle or gross, those are sometimes relevant signals, not to be ignored. We evolved to carry them. And there's simultaneously opportunity that exists to like check if the hesitation, particularly, I want to focus in on like speech, on speaking truth. You're speaking to what you see in a given moment, and the way that can become inhibited by a sense of fear or threat for social isolation or ostracization or judgment or the severing or loss of relationships with people. Those seem like core threads to me around like how fear operates in subtle relational ways between people, and often where there's a deep opportunity to step into a capacity for greater impact. There's a lot of power hidden right behind the fears of speaking to what you're noticing here and now, particularly to people that you care about and or have power relationships with, or that you have love, intimate relationships with, or attachment dynamics with. That's what I notice about. So just to summarize that, there's the unhooking of the past, looking at, examining the source, and then there's the present moment, like challenging your self-concept through active experience, like through present moment confrontation with fear that had previously ruled you, and journey towards mastery of the domain that was previously controlled by fear.
Yeah, pushing those internal boundaries a little bit. Yeah, and like that, like stepping out on a ledge, saying the thing that like you've always been thinking, but have just been like, oh, we don't say that. I don't say that thing. And there's some fear around it. There's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, and there's power in like multiple layers. There's sort of like personal power, and then there's like let me phrase it like this. There are personal hang-ups. There are like the sources of fear that limit what people can speak to. There are sort of personal autobiographical components. There's like immediate social components, but then there are collective like social mores. There are limitations that are, that we learn through media, through witnessing the patterns of punishment and reward, both in our family systems, in our school systems, our education, and in contexts like media. And we internalize those, both the things that happen directly to us, but also what we witness, what gets punished, what gets rewarded. And often it's the punishment and reward that more subtly disconnect us from ourselves and sometimes grossly and subtly disconnect us.
So from a pragmatic standpoint, how do you like practice this kind of expression or pushing fears in your own life?
Yeah, different ways. It's in all of my relationships, both my personal relationships, my work relationships, my client relationships. I check in, and like for example, like when I'm working with clients one-on-one as a spiritual counselor, I am often checking in and seeing like, is there something that seems true here that I'm afraid to say because it might upset or offend or not fit into some set of expectations that me or the client may have. We have some idea of who I am in this role and who they are in this role, and where do I participate in reinforcing that in a way that serves love, serves their liberation, their freedom, and where do I participate in a way either passively or actively by fulfilling their expectation or refusing to violate their expectation that is not serving them, that's reinforcing some type of helplessness or for example, an identity of I'm someone who's broken and needs to be fixed. A common challenge in counseling relationships is that people come in and they're suffering, and in the counseling relationship, it's very easy to fall into the trap of reifying the sense of brokenness. You can reject the suffering and pain by allowing and reinforcing the sense of judgment that the pain and suffering is wrong in some way, and that there's some wrongness in a given person. So that's one context where it comes up, is that I'm tracking with my people that I'm working with, clients or the community members in the Sangha that I'm co-running. I'm tracking whether there's a way that I'm hesitating to say something or leaping to say something. And again, those are things I track in my body, is the one, at least, is the core messenger. It's like I can feel a moment where I leap out of myself. I might feel a little bit of subtle disgust or ickiness, like I just did something that didn't feel good. Or if I'm in passivity when there's something to say, I'm tracking moment to moment that I'm starting to get resentful or judgmental or feel like there's something important that's not present. And those are my indications moment to moment in client relationships. In personal relationships, it's intimate relationships, and with my romantic partner, that stakes feel higher, of course. There are attachment dynamics at play. There's a depth of need fulfillment that, to sacrifice feels more threatening to my identity and to my way of living, and yet it becomes all the more important in some sense. The people who we love most and who we are connected to most, there's a deep disservice that we can bring to them, or a deep service, depending on if we're telling them the truth or telling them a story that doesn't actually fit. When we find ourselves when I find myself afraid to share something with my romantic partner because fear of judgment, fear of being abandoned or left or losing the relationship, it's often an indication of something that's particularly important to share, actually, because if I don't share it, what starts to happen is I become resentful or judgmental. I can start to make her wrong in some way for not knowing that there's something going on in me. I'm disowning my power through passivity, and then I'm falling out of love in that moment. My practice, broadly speaking, is how can I stay in love with each person that is in my life and each moment or situation that's in my life. How do I need to show up? What's the power I need to own, either actively or passively, to stay in love with here and now and who's in it?
And that's that jumping out of yourself that you referenced, which I viscerally understand. That feeling of I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if I have the words for it, but feeling yourself almost like you almost leave yourself for that moment and you become something else that isn't you, and you're not in the present moment. And then with romantic relationships, like you said, it feels more important, and it probably is more important than most other relationships. Yeah, do you have any, being aware that the ramifications of not being real and being true in those relationships, knowing that the ramifications are much worse, is a good starting point. Do you have any other advice for how to be bold and how to take those leaps when you are afraid this could lose me the relationship?
A lot of it starts with the willingness to hold yourself in grief, because there will be times when you lose things that you love because you stand up for yourself universally, and to honor that grief, not to run away from it. That's step one, not to pathologize the grief and sorrow that might come. To see the grief as an act of worship and love of that which may be no longer present. So the more that we can practice grieving without shifting into judgment, shame, or blame, the more that I think we can bear speaking the truth in situations that put our hearts on the line.
So just almost being aware that I'm not going to abandon myself. I'm going to be there for me if this does go wrong, whatever happened.
Yeah, and knowing it might be horribly painful, knowing that it might destroy everything you once knew about yourself, going into it willingly. And also, having acceptance and grace for the times when that's overwhelming. It's an aim for me to move towards that, and I think there's nothing wrong with the hesitation to do so, with the pull towards comfort. And I at the same time, I believe that the deepest service that I can offer anyone, including myself, is to do it anyways, to speak that truth in the moments where loss might be around the corner.
How do you accept when you don't measure up to that? I think one example, so I mentioned before, I'm like moving out of my house for not a long time, but for some time. And that meant I had to go through all my stuff and like move a lot to the garage. And I was a little upset with myself that I couldn't let go of more stuff, because I realized I have a lot more stuff than I thought I did. And there were so many things where I just like couldn't get myself to just throw it away or give it away, and I just like threw it in a box or a bag and put it in the garage. And then a part of me afterward was like judgmental. It's like, why are you holding on? Like, you're just avoiding it because you're just gonna have to go through it again later and go through this letting go pain. So yeah, how do you talk to yourself when you don't measure up in let's say a relationship?
There's like an image of an infant latched onto a mother is what comes to me immediately as I hear that. And like, do we blame infants for the way that they're attached to their mother? No. It's easy to have compassion for the infant and it's clinging, partly because of the dependence of its life on the mother, but it's beyond that too. It's like, there's grace to be offered to ourselves in moments of attachment, to objects, to people, to identities, to ways of being. There's a sense of like trust and faith that the things that keep us hooked and limited and disconnected from our sense of freedom are unfolding and falling away perfectly on time, and that we're doing the work that's available to us in front of us. We're recognizing things, and and there's judgment is part of that. It's part of the process of that. And the trap of judgment is going into a loop of judging your own judgment.
Right. Looking at it now and being like, why was that judgment? Yeah.
I mean, what I hear underneath the judgment is that it's painful to acknowledge that there's still challenge letting go of certain things. And so the co-founder of the church, Brian, he always says every judgment is a confession of disowned power or unfelt feelings. And I think that's something really important to remember, is that there's always feeling underneath judgment that is overwhelming in some way, that we have not yet found the resource and grace within or around us to be with the depth of pain that exists there.
And then the judgment is almost a way of like offloading that for the time being.
Yeah, that's the beauty of judgment. Judgment is a servant to overwhelm. It's a servant preventing us from overwhelm.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is pain associated with both the thought of letting things go and then also with, the acknowledgement, like you said, that it is hard to do. And that it's something, I mean, there's like a conflict. There's like, I want to let them go because I know that they're not serving me. Like, having a lot of stuff doesn't serve me. And I heard another, maybe it was a Stoic, but something along the lines of, when you hold on to things, you don't own them, they own you. And when it becomes compulsive, like, oh, I need to keep this thing because it's whatever, like a shirt that I got 5 years ago and it's a memory and it's tied to that. Well, that thing kind of owns me because I'm only holding on to it.
What is it that you have this box of objects, Will? What is it that you're like letting go of that's underneath the objects? Like, what is all that they represent to you? Maybe that's a big question.
Yeah, it feels pretty scattered. It feels like it's like I'm letting go of like the memory. That's the first part. It's like I'm never going to have the memory of that anymore again. And then it also feels like I'm missing out on the potential for like a future moment reflecting back on it. So it's like I'm going to lose this moment or this experience that happened in my life if I let go of this object.
Hearing it that, I wonder, like, just like brings me into a space of reflection on and like a prayer to honor all the moments that we forget, all the moments that are forgotten personally and historically, and all the beautiful, perfect, necessary pieces of the puzzle of life and history that we don't know what tiny portion of of the richness of life do we get to hold on to. We get to have it all here and now, all the richness here and now, but there's a beauty to what was a moment ago that is constantly gone, and there's a invitation into like grief and like love that it beckons.
It's kind of like an acceptance of the unknown in a way. It's because when you say that, I recognize that there are tons of experiences and tons of memories that I have lost and that I will never get back. And so similar to our conversation on the unknown, that's something that I'm now rejecting by trying to hold on to what I can. But really by holding on, I'm just trying to pretend that those other ones don't exist when they do. And those are all I've already lost.
How does it feel, like, recognizing that?
It feels nice. It feels like a weight off. Just like, yeah, it makes me feel like I want to go to the garage and start throwing stuff away.
And I would encourage you in doing that to like take a moment to honor all of the beauty that you can remember in each of those objects, and like just to praise what was through it. It's like there's omnipresent that opportunity to go into the depth of gratitude, right, for what was, for what it is that each of those objects is attached to. And I suspect you'll find more peace in that. Each, like, the need to hold on to anything, to calcify ourselves or the world around us, comes when we haven't fully honored life. So ask yourself, what do I need to do to honor the life that was and is now?
Yeah, I'm recognizing now that holding on to these objects, I'm just postponing, not just letting go of them, but also appreciating them. Because I'm not taking the object and being like, okay, what does this mean to me? I'm just like, I don't want to lose it, and then I put it somewhere. So that's really interesting to think that not only am I putting off the letting go of it, I'm also putting off the thing that I'm trying to hold on to, which is the appreciation of it.
And my experience personally is that when I get in touch with the appreciation and the grief, which are woven together, then I suddenly clean up all the stuff that I'm attached to, just spontaneously. Like the intuitive energy to clean it up appears, quite physical thing. Like I've had that experience where I go through a wave of grief, often about relationships, and suddenly I'm cleaning, like, and getting rid of things. And
yeah. So moving on from this, I am curious about what's lighting you up at the moment in life.
Well, I have a stunning community that I'm co-creating, and full of brilliant, heart-centered people, many of whom are trained in different modalities of healing and growth, and deeply committed to their thriving, their sense of peace, their power. And that community is called Lejwe Sangha. We're a entheogenic Sangha, so we work with various psychedelic medicines, and we host 3 journeys every month, and also retreats every 6 to 8 weeks or so. and some special events. And we get to just do this deep work of supporting each other into coming into presence and power and clarity and peace, and into this this kind of honoring of the past and the present, and the grieving and praising and prayer that sort of comes in that. It was all present in that community in such a rich way. And so that's lighting me up. And all the chances I get in the groups, we usually do 25 to 30 person groups, or in the one-on-one, or one-on-two work that I get to do with individuals and couples, is just like so rich and beautiful and like fulfilling for me. I just get to like watch people transition from despair and grief and horror and fear and limitation into living, breathing, powerful humans serving life, serving each other. And my life is like so unbelievably rich in that lately that I just could never have imagined. And it just keeps getting richer and richer in the opportunity to serve people and to be served by them.
How did you end up with this community around you? Like, how did you intentionally call that into your life? Or did you kind of end up with it, or what was the process?
I had kind of gone through a period of quite a lot of solitude prior to being connected to it. I had done a lot of work. I had been in a lot of community before, but went through a wave of like being with myself. I traveled around the world: Greece, Turkey, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Japan for about 8 months. And then I came back to Austin, which had been my home for a few years prior to that. And my roommate brought me to this community. And I met the co-founder, Brian, and we just like immediately hit it off. There was just such a sense of resonance about what the journey of development towards peace and freedom was about, and powerful way of orienting in life and of serving people and of bringing people together for the purposes of service. And I was like immediately lit up, and he was lit up by me, and we, I just came to every event after that. And within not much time, he sort of like named that he needed some help with organizing and growing what was starting to be there. And so I came on board, and then within not much time after that, it was clear that there was like really a sense of co-creation and cultivating of this, and that our shared vision was coming together and growing, and that we could each contribute in beautiful and equal ways towards what was there to blossom.
Yeah, so it kind of like you stumbled upon it, but you knew it when you saw it.
Yeah, immediately I felt a deep sense of like ease, ease like I'm talking about. I was like, oh, I don't have to put on any performance here. Subtle, like relaxation of like, I am who I am. Here, spaciousness to be who I am. And then desire to share that with more people.
Yeah, that's making me think about when I've had that happen. And I've definitely felt that before in certain spaces, but I don't know that I've ever actively noticed it in the moments or right after. Because thinking about living that way, where you notice, you're just in tune with your body, and when you notice that, then you say, okay, I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to go do that thing again. And like you said, you go to every event. So yeah, that's cool. Have you had that before with anything?
I've had quite a number of experiences with radically clear signals from my body guiding my life. None that have been so clear and sort of continuous in like going to the same place. It's often been like more moment to moment, which I still maintain a moment to moment experience, but this was like a very deep sense of being compelled to like become part of something beyond just me. And that was a new layer of it. I had found a deep sense of individuality in my developmental process, a deep sense of like my own personal sovereignty and agency and power and like its impact on other people. And I hadn't found a community that could hold that. All of the communities I had known previously demanded different sacrifices of my sovereignty, of my groundedness, of my sense of like who I am. And it wasn't until I came to this community that I found that it could hold that.
So going back, what's been a low point in your life to contrast with this?
There have been times where I was overwhelmed with grief and loss and a sense of rejection and not having people who were deeply connected and capable of the kind of communication and repair and clarity and directness that I do now. And yeah, there was a period of time where I went through a sequence of losses of relationships, of both the romantic partner and two like friend groups that were around me. Both kind of sort of like ended up ostracizing me for different reasons for a period of time. And some of the people I've repaired with and have connection with, and some I haven't. And there was quite a lot of pain after that. It was like during the middle of COVID, and I was staying with family, my parents. And was disconnected and just like full of grief without community to help hold and process it. And that was hard. It was hard. It was a long period of time of daily intense suffering and daily being like stuck with grief and blame and judgment and shame. And it wasn't until I went to Peru to drink ayahuasca that I got a taste of something beyond that, was able to hold and welcome the depth of grief that was stuck in me prior to that moment, and spent hours and hours sobbing in the jungle and being sung to by the shaman. And in that moment, like, it was really, I started sobbing about the relationships. I kind of went there thinking that I was there to mourn and grieve the relationships, which was true on one level. And as the sobbing continued, it became less and less personal and autobiographical and specific and more general. It was like sobbing for the ephemeral nature of reality, the beauty that we're talking about moment to moment that disappears, everything forgotten, everything and everyone that is forgotten, and the richness of all of that. And so there was a deep sense of like peace that came, and love. I mean, the core of how I got to that release, that catharsis, that acknowledgement, was that the medicine came to me as a voice, and it said, "It's okay, go ahead." And I started crying, and it said, no, it's okay, go ahead. And I started sobbing, and no, it's okay, go ahead. Continually drawing out the depth, like not letting me, in the most loving way, not letting me get away with anything less than the fullest expression of grief and worship that life is asking of me. And this, voice would say things like, I love you, I've always loved you, and at one point I turned towards it and I asked, like, who are you? What are you? And it sort of like directly speaks back to me, and it says, you know that I've been here since the beginning of time, and I'll be here in the end. A whole other wave of sobbing and grief followed. And so I don't claim to be able to make sense of that fully, but call it what you might. Don't need to name it.
Yeah, it was telling you no cop-outs, no like halfway expressions. We're going to get to the bottom of this.
And the other thing it said actually is slightly different than that. Because the other thing it said over and over again, I would come through a wave of grief, and it would say, oh, no, the tears the lost deserves are endless. And so it was like really trying to cut out this idea that there's like a completion to the process of worship and honoring. It's like, how could the infinite beauty be, how could we say that it was enough for the infinite, to honor what's no longer here? And so it was this invitation into a different way of understanding, like, yes, I will continue life and I will do other things, and there may be times that the same objects of grief that once possessed me or crippled me grab me again. I don't know. There's no like timeline or quantity that feels like problematic or, that I think ought to be judged. I think that like releasing myself and people from judgment about how much is the right amount to feels important. It's like it's different for different people in different times and different moments, and there are times when being encouraged to step back into life and habits is important for people, and there are times where people need to leave what they've known. Grief often catalyzes transformation.
So with those relationships, was the ending related to what we talked about earlier with saying something that you'd been holding in and seeing that, or was it not that?
Some of them. Yeah, some of them were like that, and some of them were more subtle dynamics of frustration and miscommunication, and probably the lack of doing those things, either the lack of or the completion of those acts can end relationships. It's like the Hydra is a good metaphor, it's like you can cut off one head and two can pop out, right? It's like if it's a half measure, or if you're not gonna fully speak to what's there, it can corrupt things further.
Yeah, that's huge. I've never thought of that. But going to these half measures in relationships, or addressing something but not really hitting the root thing and expecting that will even help, doesn't seem to be the case. I think I've definitely had that in romantic relationships where I've thought that I was confronting something by addressing something with my partner, but there was something beneath it that I wasn't addressing. And that thing kept causing problems, no matter how many of the surface level symptoms I was laying.
It's like you're leaving your towels out on the ground, or the whatever the surface level frustrations are often, excuses to come into touch with what's deeper and more challenging.
What's something you're currently struggling with?
Something I'm currently struggling with is around how to inspire and encourage mutuality of participation in community, and how to navigate the tendency in individuals to, there's like dynamics of, both towards me and towards others in the community. There's tendencies towards pedestalization or towards dismissiveness, and can be like a collection of attention towards certain behaviors, individuals, identities that I think can cost the collective. And so something I'm grappling with is how to inspire people into tracking their passivity or their like this kind of the same thing that we're talking about, but to do it real time in community. Like, when am I speaking up? When am I speaking up in a way that is leaping out of myself or not serving the collective? And when am I withholding? And those questions are like, navigating that comes with some challenges. and challenges around like, the ways that either of those patterns serve people in holding back fear and pain that might exist underneath them.
How has being in that role changed you? Like, I could see where like that identity could come with some kind of like ego boost or something where you're trying to be a certain person. Has that happened, or what's your experience being in that role?
I do my best to stay cautious of the impact of praise on me, inflating me. Of course it happens. And it's, I think largely there's things to balance. There's like, I also don't want to deflate myself and like pretend that I'm less powerful, capable, serving than I could be. And there's like a tension between those two forces and like what brings me personally the most peace. That's like the bottom line is like, okay, like how much is this balance of humility to like capacity, or humility and self-aggrandizement would be the like far end, but self-respect and there's a whole spectrum in between those two. And I've definitely found myself seriously bolstered against self-hatred and shame through it, which at times in my life has, I dealt with quite a bit. And like having the feedback, having the positive attention, having the praise does bolster you against it, in my experience. Is it the foundation that is most reliable? No. But it's true, anyways, for now, at this stage of my development. Is there a aspirational ideal that your sense of self-respect is entirely independent and unbendable, regardless of the perception of others? Yeah. I think there is an aspiration in that. And we're human, and like we're social creatures. We die when we're not accepted historically. I mean, we don't today in this world.
Probably die earlier.
Yeah, you probably do die earlier. That's true. And yeah, there's an aspiration, and there's a, the deeper hope in me is that like I can grow a community where collectively that is possible to like say, and what's true, and that it can be held. There's just like more and more collective spaciousness for that kind of practice of speaking one's truth and sharing it with the collective, and that through that a kind of collective intelligence emerges that can guide each and every person.
What does your dream life look like?
It's not much different right now. I think there will be a time when more quiet and slowness is what I choose. There are times where the intensity and busyness and speed, and Austin has a lot of that in general. There's always an opportunity. There's always beautiful people to meet and connect with. And I suspect there will come a time when like working less, having a couple sessions a week that are really deep, then like preserving my depth of attunement, presence, spaciousness, peacefulness, to give like the most potent transformative experiences to fewer people. I suspect I will move in that direction. And yeah, time will tell. I'd also probably, in that dream fantasy, being closer to nature feels relevant.
Yeah, I can relate on a lot of that. I found in my own experience that too much, so I've had a lot of stability the past couple of years, and now I'm like, I think I've sought out some chaos. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I need to like shake things up a little bit. And yesterday was an example of like me experiencing that. And yeah, it made me question whether or not like this idea of like stillness and quietness is really what I'm seeking in the long term, or is it some combination of this like order and chaos where I have that kind of space, but then also there are periods of like turbulence, and maybe that needs to be built in for like a meaningful existence.
I think like something that might be helpful frame around that is that they don't have to be in conflict with each other. They're in tension, but it's like, how much stillness and spaciousness can you experience while in the midst of busyness? These are powerful questions. It's a powerful question to ask, is like, can I expand my capacity to hold both at once? And of course, there's also cycles in life of, how we're leaning into one, leaning in the other, and that balance of like in between. But there's both the act of balancing and the act of expanding capacity for holding both at once. Feel important.
Yeah. All right, Graham. This has been really awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Do you want to tell people how they can like keep up with you, or where they can follow or whatever else?
Yeah, as it stands, I'm not really involved in social media very much, but the church website, the Sangha website, is ledgeway.org. And
how do you spell that?
LEDGEWAY.org. My personal practice website is beingfreetogether.com. And yeah, those are the two best ways to find out about me and what I'm up to, and to work with me if that's of interest to anyone, or to join the journeys that we do 3 times a month and retreats that we host.
Awesome. Thank you, Graham. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Will.
Bye, everybody.